Well, it's a Wednesday morning, middle of the week, last Wednesday of June, and the weather pattern, generally speaking, is quieter. We'll demonstrate that here in a minute. Still, the zone of most active weather is this stream of moisture, kind of a mini atmospheric river, I guess you could say, that runs through this area right here. Very obvious on the visible satellite loop here this morning. And except for a scattering of thunderstorms in the coastal areas of Texas and some that'll probably come ashore here with a weak disturbance in the Carolinas, that could lead to some severe weather, by the way, in the next couple of days, but very isolated and probably mostly a wind threat. The country is actually fairly quiet, and of course, as you know from the headlines, very hot. And if you want more information on how long that heat will last, be sure to check out my Weather to Watch video that comes out every other day. That'll be out by later today, probably around 6 o'clock Central Daylight Time. Severe weather reports pretty puny over the last 24 hours. Good news, some 1-inch hail there in parts of northeastern Georgia. Also just outside of Detroit, and some wind gusts over 60 miles per hour, one isolated cell there in northern Ohio, and a big cluster out in Colorado. And that's where the severe weather was more likely from yesterday's forecast for that period. So it turned out it verified pretty well. No tornadoes in that, although there was a slightly elevated risk of that in that area. And you can see on the morning radar that we still have this stream of moisture. This is actually the morning radar shows this precipitation kind of drifting north, very slow, so it has produced heavy rains, and there are some flood watches in effect down here, part of the monsoon. And really, when you have these big highs that develop here, what happens generally in the summer is that the moisture and the instability just kind of rotate around it like this. And again, none of these storms are severe here at this morning, and they're not expected to be, at least this morning. So we'll get right to the afternoon outlook here for severe thunderstorms issued by the Storm Prediction Center. A slight risk exists up in this area here, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and also including Charlotte and Atlanta. So two separate zones right here. This is hail and high winds. This is mostly just going to be high winds with some hail. And that's just because the atmosphere is very unstable there, but the wind shear is not what it needs to be for tornadoes, and the temperatures aloft are not really cold enough to produce large hail. So that's the difference between those two areas. And there's not much of a difference, really. And the risk on the general scheme of things is not real high. But level 2 out of 5, is something to be looked at least. There is a tornado risk today. It shifted right into the middle of that slight risk area. And the Storm Prediction Center will generally, if there's any evidence at all of shear even coming close or thunderstorm interactions that could produce a tornado, they'll go ahead and throw up a 2% risk in that same area. And sometimes that's often parallel with and helps to define where that slight risk area is. Take a look at Nadocast. It verifies from northeast Nebraska right into the northern Iowa, southern Minnesota, even over toward La Crosse, Wisconsin. They have a 5% risk there on that machine learning model. So, a little bit higher there. They're a little more pushing the button on tornadoes. Actually, CSU is kind of really too. It's just that 5% area is not as large, but the tornado area, generally speaking, is pretty good. Notice that on hail, nothing much showing up. It does maximize here only because of the thunderstorm intensity, but you'll also see, like I said, severe winds, mostly formed by collapsing thunderstorms, are going to be the primary threat there in the Carolinas, targeting South Carolina. Here's a simulated radar. This time I didn't go out 48 hours. I just went out until 1 a.m. It kind of shows what the thunderstorm evolution will be here over the next, 18 hours, I guess you could say. And so you can see how these thunderstorms this morning are going to be moving toward the northeast, and then we start getting into the late afternoon. There's a regeneration of storms, as you'll see right here. Boom. And again, some of those, there might be a tornado in one of those, but mostly these bowing segments are well known for producing wind. And because the atmospheric temperatures aloft are a little bit colder here, the hail risk is a little bit higher. So here's the outlook for tomorrow. Just 3 separate zones of relatively weak severe weather possibilities, and you can see them here. And so this is level 1. This is marginal, is the word they attach to that. And just, by the way, the green is just kind of general thunderstorm activity. If you've ever wondered about that, I just don't have that on the scale over here. As far as CSU's outlook, again, collapsing thunderstorms with strong straight line winds, down in the Georgia and South Carolina area. A little bit of a tornado risk left over in Wisconsin, over into Michigan maybe tomorrow. We'll take a look at the Friday forecast. So we still have a slight risk. On day 3, that's actually something significant. This is a stronger upper level weather system moving through, helping to drive that level 2 risk. And on that one, that's where I'd be cautious for maybe a little bit more of a tornado risk with that. Although we are getting into the season where that really starts to become less and less of a factor. That's just because the jet stream winds are weaker, and also because we don't get strong low pressure systems, at least not here in the United States, to get that low-level wind shear what it needs to be. Still that level 1 risk in the southeast. Just pop-up thunderstorms, also connected with weak little waves that are coming in from the east. So the CSU forecast for Friday has 2 separate areas of tornado development. See, notice there is that little 5% right there in South Dakota. Just keep an eye on that for Friday, along with a general hail and wind risk up there, and the wind risk again with those scattered thunderstorms out over the east. Then we get into the weekend, nothing from the SPC, but you can see there's generally a kind of a frontal system. You kind of identify it by where it is. So here's the centroid of it on Saturday, and then we go ahead to Sunday, and the centroid is moved to around La Crosse. And then on Monday, it's moved to the Indiana-Ohio border. So you can see there's a progression there of a frontal system that will be producing that severe weather possibility. Again, the SPC has not pulled the trigger on any of those areas quite yet. They may. And finally, on Tuesday, which would be day 7, today's day 1, and then just kind of an interesting pattern out on the East Coast, but nothing terribly organized, at least not yet. Supercell composite, this is 7 days worth of just looking at supercell probabilities and adding it up for each of these pretty large pixels and trying to get an idea where things will lay down. And usually this serves as a pretty good summary of what I just reviewed. And in this case, it kind of does. It just definitely shows the high level belt of severe weather possibilities from the Corn Belt, actually from Chicago westward through Iowa and into Nebraska and back, curling back up into Montana, maybe a little bit more in the southeast as those outlooks have been indicating. That was the first week, and then July 2nd through the 8th, just kind of a general area that does, and this has been kind of a consistent trend where the supercells are actually a little more south into Kansas than I might expect them to be this time of year, and the same is true for the week after that, which is getting into the middle of July. Even though the actual percentages are lower, the same general area exists, and again, this area south of here is probably a little more pronounced than I would normally see it in the middle of July. Thanks for watching today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. This is published every day after the morning Storm Prediction Center update. Also, remember to check that site off on day 1 because they update it fairly frequently. If you like this video, please like it. Also, you can subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.